Okay. Welcome to the Audit Review Committee meeting for October 26, 2021, 5 p.m. I'm calling this meeting to order. The agenda has been posted in accordance with NRS. We'll do a roll call. Judy Deschênes.
Present.
Sherry Jorgensen.
Present.
Roger Tobler.
Present.
And I am present. We're going to start with public comment. During the public comment during this portion of the agenda must be limited to matters on the agenda for action. Each person has up to 5 minutes to speak on a specific agenda items. I do not see anyone in the audience out there. Members of the public may participate in the meeting without being physically present, and in order to comment during the meeting, members of the public may call the number on the screen, 702-589-9629. Okay. Again, if you want to make a comment on anything on the agenda, please call 702-589-9629. Hearing none, we move, I assume I should read that items listed on the agenda may be taken out of order. 2 or more agenda items for consideration may be combined, and any item on the agenda may be removed or related discussion may be delayed at any time. So we're going to start with the approval of the minutes of the September 29th, 2020 Audit Review Committee.
I move to approve the minutes of September 29th, 2020.
Have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, carries. Number 2 is election of Audit Review Committee Chairperson and Vice Chairperson. I would like to stand for that position.
I was under the impression that council people were going to be the chair and the co-chair, so This is just, we really shouldn't have to do anything about it. It's no reason to have it on there. We were told at the briefing, I was told that that they wanted a council person.
You can nominate yourself or anybody you'd like. So you would just open up nominations.
What?
You would open up nominations.
I'm opening up nominations for this position.
I'll go ahead and nominate Councilwoman Bridges for the chairperson. Can we combine them, or do you want separate motions?
Separate.
Okay.
Does it need to be seconded?
And are there any other nominations? As there are no other nominations.
I'll move to close the nominations.
Okay, all in favor? Do we do all in favor? If there's only one nomination, it's by default.
If there's only one person nominated, then they're appointed by acclamation.
Okay. All right. And vice chairperson, for nominations.
Nominate Councilwoman Jorgensen.
Okay. Okay.
Move to close nominations.
All right. We have no other nominations, and so Sherry Jorgensen, co-chair, vice chair. Okay. Number 3, presentation of the Audit Review Committee, purpose and primary duties, and overview of the financial audit responsibilities.
Do is briefly go through the responsibilities of the committee, staff, and the auditor, and hopefully that'll help clarify what everybody's role is. So, first page of the, I don't know, are we going to show the PowerPoint? Okay. I don't have the clicker, so. Okay. So the first slide that we have, the Audit Review Committee members well, first of all, the Audit Review Committee was formulated in June 2011, and that was Resolution 5760, and the resolution has been replaced twice, and Resolution 7224 is currently effective. Thank you. Okay. Yep, I think so. Oops, okay. So the primary purpose and duties of the Audit Review Committee is really 3 things. Overseeing the independent audit, recommendation for selection of independent auditor, and resolution of audit findings. And by overseeing audit, that might sound kind of intimidating, but in reality, it's really when you meet with the auditors kind of at the beginning of the audit, you can ask them to focus on specific things that might be going on over the course of the year that you want to make sure that they pay attention to. And also you can ask them when you meet with them at this time of the year if they've incurred any problems with the staff. So those are the type of overseeing the audit. It would be trying to resolve any problems that the auditors may have with staff, not getting information, things like that. So it's reviewing the city's comprehensive annual financial report, which includes the independent auditor's report, and considering if it is complete and consistent with information known to committee members. And discussing the annual audit with the auditor and management, including any difficulties encountered and audit findings. And the last part of overseeing the audit is making a motion to recommend that the City Council accept or reject the city's financial statement audit and comprehensive annual financial report as presented. So after you get through this meeting, you should feel comfortable making that recommendation to the City Council. Another component of the Audit Review Committee is Auditor Selection, and periodically the city solicits proposals from audit firms to perform the city's annual audit, and generally, throughout my career, it's been about every 5 years. And sometimes you can extend that a year, or, depending on circumstances, make it less than that, but normally it's a 5-year period. The Audit Review Committee is responsible for discussing the proposals with management, if requested, viewing audit firm presentations, and recommending selection of an audit firm to the City Council. And the Audit Review Committee last completed this process in 2018 and recommended selection of the city's current audit firm for fiscal years 18 through 22. The last piece of this is resolution of findings. And when audit findings are reported, the Audit Review Committee is responsible for reviewing and discussing the findings with the auditor, requiring management create a corrective action plan, and monitoring the implementation of the corrective action plan to ensure audit findings are corrected. So the city has not had any audit findings reported for fiscal years 18 through 21. So I'm very pleased to report that. Staff is very diligent in their responsibilities, and we work very hard and take pride in all our work downstairs and try to keep track of the city's finances constantly. And although this is not an uncommon occurrence, it does require management and staff to be diligent in performing these duties, and we do take our jobs very seriously. So that segues into management responsibility, and preparation and fair presentation of financial statements in accordance with accounting principles generally accepted in the United States. And the fiscal year 2021 Comprehensive Annual Financial Report was prepared by the Finance Department. This is a big deal because it's never been done, as far as I know, in the history of Boulder City. So this year's report was done, the book that we put together was done 100% in-house. And I do want to give kudos to Martha Ford, who is actually our newest person on staff, but with her background was able to put together this annual report and did an excellent job. And the other important thing that management is responsible for is design, implementation, and maintenance of internal controls to ensure the financial statements are free from material misstatement. And then we go into the auditor responsibility. The auditor responsibility is to plan and perform the audit in accordance with auditing standards generally accepted in the United States of America and the standards applicable to financial audits contained in governmental audit standards. And their responsibility is to express an opinion on the city's financial statements based on the audit. An audit performed in accordance with applicable professional standards is designed to obtain reasonable, not absolute, assurance about whether the city's financial statements are free from material misstatement. An audit involves performing procedures to obtain audit evidence about the amounts and disclosures in the financial statements. The procedures depend on the auditor's judgment, including assessment of the risk of material misstatement of financial statements, whether due to fraud or error. Often includes the use of sampling technology. The audit also involves evaluating the appropriateness of accounting policies used, reasonableness of significant accounting estimates made by management, and overall presentation of the financial statements. So this year's audit results will be presented by the city's auditors in the next agenda item. And I think I can stop there, and we can go to Chad from Hinton Burdick.
Any questions?
Well, you had met one of your... Turn your mic on, Judy, please. Thank you. You had mentioned that one of the duties of the committee was that we met with the auditors before they did the audit, you know, to find out what the specifics. That didn't happen.
No, that did not happen this year because at the time that the auditors were coming on site, we didn't have an audit review committee. We had one member. You were the only member on that committee, so we didn't have the rest of the people selected for the committee.
Well, I don't remember. Roger, when did you join the committee? Do you recall?
I was just sworn in. I was just...
Well, I was too, but...
I don't remember which meeting it was, but it was last month or the month before, I believe.
Okay, just curious because both Claudia and Sherry were there by July 1, basically.
They were there by July 1, but the auditors came at the end of August, and they had not been appointed. I don't believe you had been chosen for the committee, and there wasn't the citizen members in time for us to schedule the audit review committee meeting in the time it takes to advertise it and everything else. So we
All right, I was just curious because I hadn't heard anything about it and, what you said, and then it doesn't happen. So I just was wondering.
that's why it didn't happen this year. But last year, we had a meeting at the beginning.
Okay, thank you.
It was right after the election, correct? Shortly the meeting with the auditor. Also, last summer would have been when we changed council members.
Right, but last year it was done later too. The auditors came later, so it was more amenable to having the meeting. But because we met, they came in earlier. They came in August this year. There just wasn't time. There was no second meeting in July. And I think by the time we firmed up the dates they were coming in, there would not have been a window to advertise it properly.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay.
Okay, so maybe we could get Chad Atkinson on the Zoom call now.
There is, pardon?
Are you ready for me?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Well, this is a one-way Zoom call. I can't see you, but I guess you can see me and probably hear me. So Can you give me a yes? We can hear you.
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, fantastic. I'm Chad Atkinson. I'm from Hinton Burdick. I'm the external auditor for the city. Our firm is. And it's nice to be with you this evening to review the fiscal year 2021 audit. This presentation will be a pretty high-level presentation, focusing on just some basic financial highlights, our opinions on the financial statements, et cetera. I'm happy to try to answer questions for you. Sometimes that takes going back to the audit file and looking to see what our documentation is, et cetera, but happy to answer any questions as we go along. So I'm assuming somebody has my PowerPoint slides, maybe moving those along. Is that the case?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. All right, so I'm on the introduction slide 2. I wanted to just say thank you to the city staff. Diane has been great to work with. We've had a good professional relationship in our audit contract. Her and her staff have been responsive to our requests, always been timely with providing information, helping us resolve anything that's left over after we do our work on site. All of those things are happening, and so we appreciate that. We also are grateful for an air-conditioned room to work in, which sometimes the auditors don't always get that, so we're grateful for that, especially in the summer heat. So we appreciate their hospitality to us, and also wanted to say thank you and welcome to the new accounting manager, Martha Ford. It's been a pleasure working with her this year, new to the city staff, but a lot of expertise and experience in governmental auditing. And so it's been a pleasure to work with her. She's come in and done some refinements of certain things in the audit process for us. Communication's been great. She's been just keeping us moving along with the audit project. So we appreciate her efforts there. Diane mentioned this already, but the preparation of the financial statements this year took place by the city staff. And we've done it the past few years in our contract, but we're happy to report that happened at the city level this year. And then we were able to be a reviewer of those financial statements. So that process went great. And I think it's always recommended if you have the resources to do it, to prepare your own statements. So we're happy to report that to the committee. And then the final thing on my slide tonight is the audit timeline or delivery of this report. The scheduling for the audit was moved up this year from where we traditionally have done the the on-site work and then follow-up work. It was moved up several weeks, and we're happy to report that we're ahead of schedule. I think we're actually having this report to the audit committee a little bit sooner than normal. So we are grateful to all the hands that have made that happen, including Martha and Diane and the things that they've done there. All right, so that's my introduction. I'm going to go into some our audit reports next. This will be slide 3. The independent auditor's report this year is found on page 9 in your financial statements. So you're welcome to look over that. The bottom line on that report is we issued an unmodified opinion or clean opinion on the financial statements. That's, as Diane described earlier, we believe there's reasonable assurance that there's no material misstatements in the financial statements. So that's the highest level of assurance that you can have from an auditing firm. The other report that we issue is found on page 137 in your financial statements, and that's the report on internal controls over financial reporting and on compliance. So we take a look, we gain an understanding of the internal controls at the city. We do walkthroughs of those internal controls to see if there's any deficiencies that may be present that need to be reported. We're happy to report that the controls are good. I think they're continuing to refine and improve those controls, but there's no significant deficiencies or material weaknesses that we came across in that process. And then on compliance, we do some compliance with various matters. In particular to the state of Nevada, we look at the NRS compliance, and we're happy to report that we didn't come across any instances of non-compliance with NRS provisions. So these are all great things for the report card on the city's audit this year. Are there any questions at this point?
This is Judy. I have one.
Okay.
Do you do any, I guess, sampling or go back into it to verify that the figures they give you on the report match up with the actual invoices or payments or anything like that?
Absolutely. Yes, there's quite a vast selection of invoices that we call, it's called vouching, right? So
right.
We pull invoices, we vouch several invoices throughout the city and all of the funds really, based on materiality and other things. So yeah, there's a lot of those. Those are all documented in our audit file. In particular, we spend a little bit more time with capital asset area, looking at major purchases there. So does that answer your question?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Okay. Sounds great. If there's no other questions, I'll go to the fund financial highlights. And I hope, I know that we sent a delivery to the city of the financial statements. I should have asked at the beginning, but I'm assuming everybody's got a hard copy or an electronic copy to look at. And I'm going to be looking at page 30 and 31 in your statements for just a few minutes. So if you want to turn there. I do this in my presentations because I believe this is the statement of revenues and expenditures for your governmental funds. And I just like to give the audit review committees or councils a chance to look at this and to see the major funds that are reported. Right now, the city has the general fund and the capital improvement special revenue fund that are major funds. And then they have a non-major governmental fund column that includes several different funds. So I just wanted to point that out. And major fund reporting is just dependent on the size. So if you want to look at the bottom of page 31 or the fourth line from the bottom, the change in fund balance, I'm going to talk a little bit about this just for a few minutes.
Madam Chairman?
Yeah.
You got to look at the number to the right.
Okay.
Okay, the bottom one is a different number that what he's
Yes,
referring
so
to.
it'll be number 77 on our,
Right.
yes, that's what, Thank you.
Just figuring out electronic copies probably.
Yeah, our agenda is numbered as
Okay.
well as the report. And so we're trying to make sure we're on the correct page. So it's the,
Sounds good. Okay to continue?
so yeah, the
Okay.
31 at the top is governmental funds, correct? Yeah.
Yep. Okay, so I'm going to be looking at all of your governmental funds together just to give some high-level comments. The change in fund balance for all of your governmental funds for fiscal year 21 was 13.9 million. So that's an increase in resources in the city. That's a very good result for the year. How does it compare with last year? Last year's change in fund balance was 7.1 million. So it's actually improved from the previous year. There were a couple of changes during the year that I thought I'd point out. The revenues were actually down for all of the governmental funds in total, down 6.5 million, but the expenditures were down more than the revenues were down. So that's why you got a better result. So the revenues that were down were intergovernmental revenues, and those were regional transportation commission revenues mostly that happened a lot in the previous year, but not so much in fiscal year 21. So that caused the revenues to go down. There were some areas that were improving in the revenue area. One of those was the rents and royalties. Your energy lease revenues were up 7.3 million. So some good improvements there. The intergovernmental revenues going down is expected. That's a non-recurring type revenue. On the expenditure side, the expenditures were down from the previous year by 13.5 million. And that was primarily due to less capital projects that were done in fiscal year 21 versus 20. Fiscal year 20, you had some public work projects like the Boulder City Parkway going on. And so there was more expenditures in the previous year than this year. And I should point out the general fund was right about break even. If you looked at page 31, its change in fund balance was 28,788. And it made some significant transfers out. If you look up above the change in fund balance, you can see 11.2 million was transferred to other funds for various purposes. I'll give you just a rundown of those. So 2.8 million was transferred to special projects. Compensated absences fund had 1.8 million. Fixed maintenance was 1.5 million. Risk management 1.7. Vehicle replacement 1.5. And revenue stabilization 2 million. So those were transferred from the general fund to support those other funds. So the general fund actually would have, without those transfers, would have been a really high change in fund balance. Okay, so I'm going to pause there. And do you have any questions on the governmental funds before I flip over to your business type funds, proprietary funds, and discuss those for a few minutes?
Any questions? Judy?
I have a question. Just out of curiosity, I probably really know the answer and just am not thinking of it. But on page 30, under the expenditures, now I understand recreation, but what do they consider culture and what is community support? A definition of what would probably be in those two categories.
Those are great questions, and that's probably a good something that Diane and Martha could provide you the detail with. There's several different activities that go into those. So
okay, that's fine. I'll get with them after. Thank you.
They could provide you the details on those. Yep. Okay. So we'll look at proprietary funds next, and that's going to be on page 36 and 37. This is a statement of revenues and expenses for your business type funds. You've got a utility fund, an aviation fund, and then a non-major cemetery fund. So the major changes here is that this has what's called a change in net position, and that's about 5 or 6 lines from the bottom of the statement. The change in net position was a positive 15.2 million in fiscal year 21. Last year, it was only 12.2 million. So it's actually improved from the previous year. Operating revenues in these statements were up, and it's primarily going to be in the utility fund. The operating revenues were up. There was a $2 million increase in water hookup fees that took place in fiscal year 21, and this had to do with 2 solar projects that were going on. So there was some hookup fees related to that. And then the other thing that's pushed the revenues up for fiscal year 21 was some CARES Act funding that was received in the airport fund for $834,000. So you saw an increase there. On the operating expenses, those were up $714,000 from the previous year. And I don't have, it was kind of a spread of different increases in different categories. And so I didn't detail that out, but that's the overall increase for fiscal year 21. And then you had a transfer in on this statement. If you looked at the utility fund, right above the change in net position, there's a transfer in of 3.1 million. And that's from your capital improvement special revenue fund that was transferred into the utility fund. So that was all my planned comments there. Do you have any questions as you're looking at this, or anything that I've said?
Yeah, I do have a question. After net position, beginning of year adjustment. Now, where does that, for example, the utility fund shows a $6.1 million adjustment.
That's a great segue into my next bullet point on my slide.
Yay,
So,
okay.
can I answer that? Yeah. So on page 51, you'll find a detail of prior year adjustments that were made to the statements. A capital asset inventory was started in the finance department that really overlapped a couple of different years. In fiscal year 20, there was a lot of reconciliation of capital assets. And then in fiscal year 21, Martha came in and kind of continued that process of identifying assets that the city had on hand, adjustments that maybe needed to be made to previous year information. And so in that process, there were adjustments made for that asset inventory that was completed. So it was pretty extensive, and we worked with the finance department on those changes. They kind of completed the inventory and then got on the phone with us, and we went over all the changes that they had identified, and then those adjustments were made to the statements.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. All right, so I'm going to review, the last bullet point on this slide is the review of fund balances and net position or net position balances. Just to remind those on the committee, net position or fund balance is really just if you have your assets and you subtract the liabilities, you have what's left over in terms of resources on hand. So my slides are kind of geared to talk about the resources that the city has on hand in some of the major funds. So I'm going to go to slide number 5, and this is the general fund. And I'm going to just talk about these different trends that are going on. We have a 5-year trend here. You can see this top line is your unassigned fund balance, and it's down 5.4 million from the previous year, but not to worry. If you look at the committed fund balance, it's up pretty much the same amount, 5.4 million. So what happened was the city decided to classify some of its fund balance as emergency reserve. And so when you take it out of an unassigned and put it into committed, it just changed the allocation between those two fund amounts. So that's why you've got those lines coming together. And then the non-spendable at the very bottom that's just inventories and prepaids that have already been purchased that are not spendable cash. So as I said earlier, the general fund's fund balance was up 28,000. So it's pretty break even. So this is just showing a reallocation between two different categories. Overall, the general fund has about 7 months of operating reserves on hand. So that's in good shape. Any questions on this one?
How is that reserve fund protected? I mean, is there an ordinance that created the reserve fund, or is it something that could easily be moved back? I guess I just want to know how it's categorized or protected as a reserve fund.
How it's protected?
Yes.
So restricted fund balance comes from restrictions outside of the city. So those are would happen with like a debt covenant or a grantor putting locks on that. A committed fund balance is generally done within the city. So that would have been probably a resolution or a decision within the city council to say that we want to set aside this money. Can it be changed? Yes, it can. But that's how it's put into the committed category.
So I guess, can I go ahead and ask another question?
Sure.
I guess this would be for staff, but as far as if that was changed, does that take a public meeting in order to change that and a vote at the city council, basically?
I believe it does.
Okay.
The different, I'm just going to look really quickly because it's a little different between organizations, and maybe Martha or Diane might know off the top of their head. Is committed required for city council resolution? Is that correct?
Yes, committed requires that be removed in the same manner that it was added.
Thank you.
Okay.
Those are described in the notes on page 48.
48, yep. There you go. Looks like it was formal action or resolution by the council on that. So that's how it got put there. Does that sound okay on that?
Yes, my question was answered. Thank you.
Yep, you bet.
Madam Chairwoman?
All right. So
Yeah, we're fine. Oops.
Madam Chairwoman?
Yes.
Excuse me. So we found out that the telephone was not working for the first public comment period, so we'd advise you to set aside some time to reopen the public comment period. It is working now.
Should we do it now, or should we wait until?
Before you vote.
Before we vote.
Would be ideal, yes.
Okay.
sounds great. I will keep going. And so I'm at slide number 6. This is on your Boulder City Capital Improvement Fund balance, voter approved. This is a fund that requires voter approval to utilize the funds. And you can see from fiscal year 20 to fiscal year 21, you've got a pretty good increase, a $3 million increase in this fund. And so I wanted to point out, we had discussed this earlier, I believe there's $7 million of this fund is set aside for a pool project.
Yes.
City's
Yes.
planning for. So that is included in that 14.6 million.
Okay.
No other comments really there. Unless you have any questions, I'll go to the next slide. The utility funds, net position. So the utility funds, the unrestricted net position is now, it went from 39.9 million to 50.2 million. That's a $10 million increase. There's 24 months of operating reserves in your utility funds. The next line down there, the 40.2 million, is your net investment in capital assets. And this captures information on all of the changes in your capital assets that carry out the utility system functions. So it includes depreciation and payments on debt related to that. Essentially, this is down due to depreciation, 41.8 million down to 40.2 million. So you have depreciation. You also have that adjustment that we talked about previously related to capital assets would affect that. And then asset additions of about the same amount that were reduced. So that one trends depending on the year, you know, if you have capital asset additions or depreciation, but it's down a little bit from the previous year. And then the restricted amount at the bottom is it's 1.4 million for fiscal year 21, and it's down a little bit from the prior year because there was a debt service restriction in previous years that no longer applies. And so the only thing that's left on that restricted balance is funds that are set aside for the landfill construction and expansion. So that's the 1.4 million there.
Okay, I did have a question.
Okay.
Could you repeat, okay, the 40,267,306, which is the net investment in capital assets. You said it was I'm going to capture your changes in capital assets.
Yep.
So increases or decreases as opposed to evaluation.
That's correct. It's based on the historical cost of the assets.
The historical cost. Okay. I just want to make sure I understand.
Yep. And yeah, I know, I understand. This is accounting lingo, right? We're going through accounting lingo. So yeah, it captures everything there and the depreciation on those assets as well.
Okay. Thank you.
So unrestricted, I should have pointed out the unrestricted balance. Oh, I did say that. 24 months of operating reserves there. So you're in good shape. Okay, so then I want to hit the aviation fund and then your cash balances, and then we'll be wrapped up here. So the aviation fund's on slide number 8. The net investment in capital assets here is down a little bit from the previous year due to depreciation, and then there were also some adjustments made from the capital asset inventory that we described earlier. The unrestricted is actually up 741,000. And this is due to some CARES Act funding to support operations that came in. So the aviation fund's pretty stable. Unrestricted's up just a little bit. And then finally, the Boulder City cash balances at the very end. Your governmental cash is up 20 million from the previous year, and your business type cash is up 10.1 million. And it's important to point out that you have a fairly large city, right? And you know the cost of these projects that take place, whether it be a utility fund project or a capital improvement project within the city. So determination of how much cash the city should keep on hand is really a discussion matter for city council to determine that. But cash balances are up, and the city's in good financial health.
Okay.
Any questions here that I can answer? My last slide, it just has my contact information. And I also wanted to point out my wonderful helper, Crimson Singleton. She's my senior manager. We just tag team together. We work together as a team, and she did some great work. I wanted to give her some commentary on what she did, and thankful for her, and thankful for this to the city for allowing us to do this work.
I have a quick question.
Yep, yes.
And I probably should have asked this earlier. I'm just curious on the fund balances. You talked about an asset devaluation or something that created the decrease in the fund. Was that, I mean, that wasn't due to depreciation. Was that due to what type of assets being written off, or I guess, what was the process in that?
The capital asset inventory, I think is what you're referring to. Yeah. So the capital asset inventory was what we described with the finance office just going through those lists in detail. And I know Martha walked out to departments and said, okay, do we have these items? Where are they? Where are they on the list? It was pretty thorough. We felt like some of those adjustments were from previous years, like previous to my firm being involved. So determining buildings, the condition of buildings, improvements that have been done to the buildings, and reconciling that with what we had on costs for those various things. So it was a pretty extensive process that Martha went through. I don't know if she wants to comment on it now, but that's essentially it.
Yes, as indicated, I did go out to the various departments and sit down with them and say, okay, this is the list of assets that they say your department has. Can you show me where they are? One of the biggest ones that I found was the city just went through a very extensive renovation and upgrade of the fire station. And yet the fire station costs from prior years were still on there. So that was probably one of the biggest items that came off that's part of that prior period adjustment. But other items were similar to that. For example, I sat down with the city's garage supervisor and said, okay, this is the list of cars or vehicles that are still on the books. And he's going, oh, that's been gone for years. That's gone for years. That's gone. Oh, we have those. And so it was just a matter of really cleaning up the list, determining what the city still actually had in its possession, and moving forward.
So I just want to add one comment too. This I thought was kind of amusing that we found the statue that wasn't accounted, wasn't part of our inventory, and it was the little children out front.
Oh, interesting.
So it was amazing that, Martha she turned every stone over and found everything, or what wasn't there, she also removed if it no longer was part of the city. So it was a massive project that she undertook.
So I take it this is probably the first time that type of adjustment had been really made to the asset?
There was a part of that was done last year.
Okay.
And it just was such a big project that it's taken 2 years to get done.
Yeah, the prior, as Diane indicated, that prior period adjustment is a net number. I believe there was, I don't remember how much I found that should have been added and had not been. But yes, the statue, I actually found that one amusing. They captured a bunch of the statues, but they left the one that everybody walks past off.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
I do have a couple of other questions. I don't know if it's really for staff or for the auditor. I don't know if somebody else wants to go.
You're welcome to ask them.
They're not difficult questions. I just, when you, by the way, I sat on this in 2011 through 2015, and I got to tell you, I am very impressed with this. Your presentation and the city being able to provide this, because that was had been one of our concerns, and auditors in the past had said, at some point the city needs to be able to provide this as well in-house. So I just want to commend you on that. as far as these financial statements go, do these mirror how they are listed in the budget as well? I mean, are they categorized the same as the budgetary process? Because it shows in here, for example, in the financials, it tells you what the actual budget is versus everything else. And so are the categories, if I were to look at the budget, would it mirror what's in here? Not the amounts, I mean the categories.
You know, I think Martha's the best one to comment on that. Martha, do you want to take that one?
Yes, thank you. I believe that they are fairly consistent. I'm not going to guarantee that it's going to be an exact mirror to if you took the budget book and compared it side by side. I do know that the funds are probably shown in very different orders because this is shown in the order of your major funds first, then the combining and non-major last. But the categories should be pretty close, but I can't guarantee they're going to be 100%.
Okay, I guess what I was kind of looking at is if on 77 when we look at the general fund, and I don't have any concerns with how this is listed. I don't want to give that impression, but you have general government, legislative, executive. The reason why I'm asking this is very different than how I'm kind of used to it in the past. And so is this kind of how you guys see it when you approve the budget, or when you ask for the budget to be approved? Is it kind of broken up in the same categories like this?
I believe it is. I worked very closely with the city's budget manager on this. She reviewed it several times to make sure there were consistencies. So I believe the categories are the same.
And this isn't a budget meeting, so I don't want to get off track here. I just, when I look at the legislative, you got the executive, before we would list it out as city manager, city attorneys, city clerk's office, so you've basically combined them into one. With, I guess, the legislative just being mostly the city council?
I believe so. Off the
Correct?
top of my head, I
Okay.
believe so.
All right. I just wanted to make sure I understood.
This was categorized and grouped this way at least last year, and I believe the prior year as well. I can't really speak to years prior to that.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
No, and that's fine. I just wanted to make sure I was following the process. Thank you.
Yeah, and also, the legislative is, that's more than just city council, isn't it? Is it, pardon?
It would have to be just in the dollar amount.
Just in the dollar amount? Would that also be the appointeds? Is that?
I would have to get back to you on
Okay,
exactly
yeah.
what departments are in there.
Yeah, I think that some of the terminology is.
I believe the city clerk's office is also included in that.
Oh, okay.
And probably
City attorney.
city attorney, yep.
Okay, because in the notes, it talked about the legislative being the city council, but it was just a general statement. So I didn't know where, as far as the executive versus the legislative, I would assume most of the staff would be under executive, but,
Yes.
okay.
Looking at notes here.
One thing I wanted to comment on too is I believe that the Department of Taxation does some cross-checking of the budget with the financial statements once they receive it.
Okay. Well, and through here, it does show your actual balances versus ending balances, and I mean your projected balance versus your ending. So like I said, I was really impressed going through this. So
I'd be interested in legislative. In reading the notes, it says the legislative authority is in the city council, but it doesn't say that the legislative line item, the salaries, employee benefits and services so far, are just part of, that's all legislative category is.
Yes. The numbers, the amounts reported on page 77 under legislative would be for all departments classified as legislative type departments. The note is talking about more of the
authority.
legal form of the government
Right,
rather
right.
than the accounting for the government for it.
Well, I guess that's why my question was, I guess the budget process would be obviously more detailed as far as what comes before the city council and how it's broken out, so.
Yes, I believe it is considerably more detailed.
Okay, more questions?
Yeah, on that page 77, there, before you've got the expenses, you've got investment income and miscellaneous. What kinds of things are in those two items?
Investment income would be in interest, dividends, the change in fair value of the investments, et cetera. Miscellaneous would be just any odds and ends that the government collects, revenues or donations, et cetera, that the city collects that wouldn't fit in any of the other specific categories.
Okay, thank you.
Any more questions? Okay. Is that portion complete?
Just one other quick
I
comment.
believe I'm finished, yes.
You are finished with your presentation?
I think
Okay.
I'm finished, yes, sorry, I can't
No,
see.
no, that's okay. I just, yes.
Just for historical, I don't know if, how often the city has had no findings. Was this the first or second year? But I remember for many years, there was always a few findings, and a lot of it was due to software not communicating with each other. But this is, I mean, a clean opinion and no findings.
This is fourth year.
Fourth year, right. Good job.
Yeah, that's impressive. And this report is impressive. Very easy to follow, and the fact that we did this internally is good job, Bob.
Just a real quick comment, and I think I mentioned it earlier, but when we were looking for a new audit firm, and Chad and his team, Hinton Burdick, we spoke about how this audit was going to go over the 5-year period, and I told him at that time that we were planning at some point to do the report in-house, because my whole career we've always created our own report, but I had to get the proper staff to do it, and I thought I was not going to be able to do it this year, because this is a transition to a new accounting manager. And when Martha came on board, I said, no pressure. If you can't do it, that's okay, because I know you're new. And she took on the challenge and has done an incredible job of putting it together. And I'm just very, very happy that she's on board, and she did a great job. And I hope we just improve it with, as time goes on, each year it gets a little better.
Usually these reports are extremely boring, to be honest, but you guys actually put a lot of historical things in there as well, and just factual things that kind of help people understand some of the history behind some of the funds, and you also explain the fund balance versus the ending balance very well in the report, because that can be very confusing. So thank you.
I enjoyed reading the notes. I thought it was very informative, and it helps bring this all together. The numbers make sense, and the fact that there were no findings we are going to get that award. Just don't have it yet.
That's right. The GFOA is reviewing our report. We're going to submit the new one. And we know because of COVID that they are seriously behind on their audit report reviews, but we fully expect to hear from them, hopefully before the end of the year, and get that certificate of achievement.
I noticed some big differences in some of the accounts, from what was budgeted to what was the actual. I am assuming because of what they are that it had to do with COVID more than anything else, where things were, because I know the city council, I remember them asking you guys to freeze on hiring, take projects that could be postponed to postpone them and stuff like that. So is that what you would attribute to most of the big differences between what was and what was projected?
Yes. That's a quick answer because you didn't ask specifics, but in general, I would say that is what we tried to do because we didn't know how things were going to turn out with COVID.
Yeah, no, I remember.
So we tried to really hold the line on expenditures.
No, I remember the council meeting when that was discussed and you guys were asked to do that. But as I told you Thursday, and I'll say it again, that compared to what we had for accounting for budget reports, not to mention audit reports, prior to Diane getting here, there's a world of difference. They just made no sense and no one could explain anything to me from back then. So I do appreciate the cleanup you've done and following the principles that should be there. So I do appreciate it. Your department has done a great job over the last 4 or 5 years. So great job.
Any other questions, comments? Okay. For possible action. But we're going to have call-ins right now. The telephone system was not working prior to the meeting, so we will now go back to the public comment with questions relevant to the agenda items. The telephone number to call to provide a comment is 702-589-9629.
Public comment?
Yes, I have public comment.
Go ahead.
Yes, good evening, committee members. For the record, Fred Volz. There are at least 2 material problems with this audit. In each of the last 3 years of audits, the finance director and Hinton Burdick were alerted to the absence of visible spot checking of capital project spending by the external auditors. Such spending totals over $41 million for the current fiscal year and contains over $90 million, including the municipal swimming pool, in the 5-year plan subject to Wednesday's workshop. These are material dollar amounts for a city of 15,000 people and should not be ignored, trusted to the honor system, or glossed over in sweeping generalizations about the alleged adequacy of internal controls. Not one paragraph of 257 pages has been devoted to any narrative on this subject. Creating an authorization chain of signing approvals among city employees does not represent an acceptable internal control process, nor does it address some of the many potential problems of fraud, waste, and abuse in such areas as collusion with external vendors and/or among city employees, verifying invoices for compliance with contract terms and conditions, verifying the quality and adequate completion of work before approving progress billings, authorizing documentation for contracts and purchase orders, ensuring commitments are matched with goods and services receipts and quality verification, verifying payments are made only for goods and services received, reviewing the controls in place for managing the allocation between capital and expense, and monitoring cash flow and the use of capital throughout the project. The audit's silence on all of these issues, plus statements on pages 37 and 203 reflecting the audit firm's waiver of responsibility for material weaknesses they might miss, should concern each committee member. A capital improvement coordinator, city employee operating without any visible oversight does not automatically protect public funds from misuse and abuse. Another oversight has been known for over a year by the finance director without any move toward correction and improvement. The failure to isolate unrestricted cash and future utility payments between the operating and capital accounts via a simple munis allocation algorithm. Knowing the amount of available cash is fundamental to prudent spending and budgeting. While the city budgets for these two categories separately, it merges the cash balances in financial reporting, both in the annual and monthly CAFR reports. The 9/30/21 unrestricted cash is over $40 million, with no clear knowledge of whether it is available for operating or capital expenses, an unacceptable financial practice. Quote, the potential for error, unquote, expressed by the finance director is not an acceptable excuse for doing nothing. Lastly, there is one nakedly misleading statement on page 97 regarding the city's budget. Earlier this year, there was one scheduled public workshop on the city's operating budget. It was publicly noticed for 90 minutes. At the 45-minute mark, in the middle of a long list of questions about undocumented budget increases, the finance director and acting city manager abruptly ended the meeting, declaring, quote, we have no time for this, unquote, and never subsequently answered the questions raised in a detailed written document submitted to both of them. The workshop was a travesty. The closing suggestion would be to approve some, but not all of this audit, subject to corrective action being taken to fix the deficiencies noted above. And I would ask that these comments be added to the record of the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. Again, if you wish to call in to provide a comment, the number is 702-589-9629. Okay. Hearing none, we will continue. Okay. Okay. The possible action is to recommend that the City Council accept the financial statement audit and comprehensive annual financial report for the year ended June 30th, 2021. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Okay. Seconds?
Second.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? It passes. We now have our second opportunity for public comment. You can call in at the same number, 702-589-9629. Hearing none. A motion to close? No, we do not. Start do that. What? We just adjourn? Okay. This meeting is adjourned.